Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Magdi Hanna. I am the chairman of the International Institute for Software Testing, and I'm pleased to be your host in this free webinar today. First, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to be with us today for this webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the International Institute for Software Testing. During the webinar, you can submit your questions anytime through the questions tab. And today's speaker will try to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available at the website for IIST, that's testinginstitute.com, sometime next week. At the end of the webinar, you will receive a feedback form or a feedback email. We'd appreciate it if you take a few minutes to fill out the form, because we here at IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality education for the public. So please, we appreciate your time. For now, let me introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Eran Kinsbrunner. Eran is a chief evangelist and author at Perfecto. He has 19 years in development and testing. He has written 2 wonderful books. If you have not seen them yet, I suggest that you can go to Amazon and get those. The first one was the digital quality handbook. And the second one, which I'm personally reading right now, is the continuous testing for DevOps professionals. I would like to thank Eran very much for taking the time from his busy schedule to be with us, to share his experience and knowledge with us. For now, let me welcome our speaker, Eran Kinsbrunner. Eran, please go ahead.
Thank you, Magdi. So excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all of you for joining. And I hope you will find the content useful. Whatever I'm presenting, as mentioned by Magdi, I've been in this space for nearly actually 20 years already. In these books that I authored and my almost weekly blogs, I speak about real life examples that I see from all over the place. I'm working with Perfecto, which is a Perforce company. So we are serving a lot of mobile and web application developers and testers. So we are actually seeing a lot of challenges over the past few years. So from these experiences, as well as some best practices, I'm going to share some of them with you. And as mentioned by Magdi, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat panel. So before I dive into the testing suites maintenance and keeping them valuable, at the end of the day, we are trying to be, as testers, as valuable as possible. And the keyword that I'm adding to this sentence is the continuously, because whatever you are doing today and testing, you know, the current version, it's fine. No one will forgive you if the next version of your software will not be as good as the previous one. So we are not being appreciated for today. We are actually appreciated for continuous valuable feedback on the testing that we are performing. So in today's agenda, I'm going to cover where we stand today in the market, especially on the web and mobile phone, because it's quite important, as especially these days where we are, the world is actually facing an unprecedented crisis. I think that digital is becoming the only method of engagement with clients. So you want, as a service provider, business owner, to have your digital channels functioning all over the place, across all platforms. I would say even 24/7, because we are a global industry. So I'll talk about the market. I'll talk a bit about what to automate, because again, you want to be providing valuable feedback continuously. So if tests are obviously outdated, you are actually reducing the value of these test cases. So how to decide what to automate, again, based on my experience with a lot of industries, how to certify the test that you actually decided to automate, and how to maintain these test cases over time. So as I mentioned earlier, digital is becoming more critical today than ever before. Whoever is serving clients today from physical buildings and offices is now facing a very dramatic experience, if you like, because today the only way to engage with businesses is through web, mobile, and actually both. So you want to have your, again, digital experience working at all times across all platforms, because as you will soon see, the digital platform providers are not on strike. Okay, new browser versions, new operating system versions are constantly being released. Just last week, iOS 13.4 was released to the market. Android 11, which is the next version, is already in advanced beta versions from a maturity perspective. So the digital platform machine continuously evolves regardless of the current tough times that we are experiencing. So you want to catch up and keep up with everything that is going on. So as a current market landscape, if you like, what I see continuously when I'm engaging with clients, regardless of their geography or their segment, whether it's the financial one, the insurance, or healthcare, whatever industry that I'm engaging, I keep hearing the same complaints. We do not have the right skill set to automate our testing. Testing is being done separately, either being thrown to us over the wall by the developers. We cannot automate all of the advanced scenarios, capabilities that the app supports. You can think about a mobile application that has chatbot or audio support, voice assistant. Automating it with traditional open source frameworks such as Appium is not as straightforward as you would expect. So this is another complaint that I keep hearing. The testing that is done, especially if it's done in a separate group, it's hardly being integrated into the CI/CD pipeline, making it, from a feedback perspective, sometimes irrelevant at all. The time that teams are spending to even analyze the reports is way too long to make sense out of this data. Setting up test environments, keeping them up to date. As I mentioned earlier, new iOS was released, new Android was released, latest Firefox got updated. Keeping up with all these environments, regardless of just the service virtualization and network virtualization capabilities, even the platforms that you are testing against, keeping up with all of that is a very huge challenge in today's world. And by the way, and I've not mistakenly put these cross arrows between the different panes, because if you think about it, a lot of these challenges kind of either trigger the other challenge or coexist with the other challenges. For example, when you have an automation skill gap in your organization, obviously you are limited from advancing your test automation scenarios coverage. Obviously, you're going to result in escape defects, and the test maintenance will also be quite expensive because you didn't develop from the beginning your test scenarios in a proper way. Okay, so this is kind of the nightmare of software testing in the past few years, by the way. And unfortunately, we do see things such as AI, machine learning, creation tools, record and playback, that are trying to kind of address both the skill set and the maintenance of these test automation scenarios. But at the end of the day, if you look at the current landscape, the current organizational status, I'm not hearing more than 60, sometimes even less percentage of test automation success. So this is our starting point. Okay, we want, we are in the 2020s. We want to try, especially as we move to only digital, we want to have a higher degree of test automation coverage and success, which is trustworthy by both the test automation managers and the developers. So if you connect the digital transformation slide that I presented with the test automation challenges, you can look at these following 2-3 slides as like a mirror of the current maybe root cause as well. So if you look at just the Android market share, it's being divided by 6 different permutations or operating system families, with a 7th one, Android 11, coming soon. iOS is distributed by 2 to 3 operating systems, with iOS 14 that is just around the corner. Apple is going to conduct the Worldwide Developer Conference in a month or so. It's probably going to be virtual because of the situation, but they are going to announce the iOS 14, which is going to add like the 4th operating system family to this mix. So market fragmentation on the mobile front, it's quite significant, and it can cause a lot of digital headaches to test automation as well as developers. And if it's not enough to say that we have 6 Android stock OS versions like Android 8, 9, 10, and 7 as well, and 11 that is just coming up, you have the OEMs, the device manufacturers, that are taking these operating systems and customizing them to their own proprietary operating system flavor. Like the Galaxy S20, which is the latest Samsung, is running on One UI 2. The S7, which is quite popular around the world, is running on TouchWiz UI, which is a different operating system. And if you look at other vendors such as Huawei, LG, which are quite popular as well, you see that they are also taking the the stock OS version, and they are customizing it. And why is that important? It's important because the coverage of your test automation for the digital landscape is quite hard. If it was just these vendors taking the Android 10 from Google and keeping it intact on their real devices, it would have been probably much easier, because when Samsung S8 gets updated to Android 9, it's the same Android 9 that I have on the Samsung S10, okay? But it's not the case here. It's the stock OS, which is being overlaid with a custom operating system from the OEMs, device manufacturers, which makes it impossible for you to drop a device configuration in a different family operating system. You want to cover them all just to not have an escape defect situation on your mobile native or hybrid application. And oh, by the way, as mentioned, this COVID-19, the current landscape that we are living in, does not slow down. This is the landscape as it looks like throughout, the Q1 until actually Q3 of this year. You see that already in Q1 2020, over 30 distinct devices were released to the market on top of the ones that are already available since 2019. The market never stops. That's the message here. And the operating systems are also marching as scheduled. They are not being impacted by any viruses or anything like that, which mandates you as developers, as testers in the digital era, to keep up with all these configurations, to make sure that you have access to all of these devices, and not just simulators and emulators, because they are quite different by nature. Okay, so this is the mobile. If you look at the web isn't that much fun either, because it's also kind of fragmented, and you can see the different configurations of the desktop operating systems and browsers. And oh, by the way, you can actually cross match between them. So for example, on a Mac OS Catalina, which is the latest, you can definitely install a Chrome browser, and you actually should install a Chrome browser. So you suddenly see, okay, I need to test macOS Catalina with the latest Safari -1, and oh, by the way, the latest Chrome and Chrome -1. So this is just 4 distinct configurations. For Windows, you have Windows 10, 7, and 8, which also supports Chrome, Firefox, and IE or Edge. And Edge, by the way, is equivalent to Chrome because it inherited the Chromium project. So what I'm saying here over the past few minutes is that the digital landscape is continuously evolving, continuously changing, and by the way, continuously supporting the flakiness in your test automation coverage. Okay, if you had a nice test suite that was running on a responsive website, let's say up until 2 months ago, you cannot trust whatever you got in this regression cycle 2 months ago, because since then few operating systems on the mobile and on the web were released, few bunch of new smartphones which are running on custom operating system versions were also introduced. So you need to have this continuous engine running and evaluating all of your platforms, else you're going to result with escape defects. So this is like, I provided you kind of a nice mobile calendar for 2020. I did the same for the web, and I haven't done any mistakes on the Edge. Edge is kind of a copy paste of Chrome, because Edge is now Edge Insider. That's the new name that Microsoft gave the Edge browser. Is actually running on the Chromium project. So they are trying to keep up. Maybe they are not fully 100% committed to the schedule, but my gut feeling is that we're going to see almost one-to-one Chromium OS version running within the Edge browser, even though it's not exactly the same browser, because Edge brings on top of the Chromium project their custom UI with some additional capabilities. So testing just Chrome is definitely not enough. If you have a responsive website, you want to test also on the Edge Insider. And just to finalize the landscape, this is taken from August 2019. If you're not familiar with the OpenSignal website, I strongly recommend that you bookmark this website, because it gives a nice overview of different mobile carriers and how they perform across different geographies, different carriers in the world, not just in the US. So this can give you an additional layer of network virtualization recommendations, so you get full end user experience coverage within your test automation. You can see here that, Sprint actually didn't win any of these badges, which, by the way, makes it a perfect candidate for your testing, because you don't want to test on the API path against Verizon, your mobile native or hybrid or even web application. You want to test against the best one just to get the benchmark, and you want to see how you can improve the end user experience on the poorly performing networks, such as Sprint and maybe AT&T from a latency perspective. So after giving this brief intro to the digital reality that we live in, let's just focus now on how you actually develop software test automation in a DevOps reality. Okay, so basically I try to make bold the key words in each statement. So if you ignore all the words and just read the sentence in bold letters, you can actually get your test strategy in one sentence. Continuous testing of all testing activities that gives value across the team, focusing on product coverage. Okay, I didn't read any of the bullets. I just read a sentence to you that summarizes the test automation strategy that needs to focus on a DevOps team. And how is that? I'm talking here about testing that is done continuously upon each pull request, upon each code change in your software product. You want to test all testing activities, and that's a very, very important statement, because it's not just the functional thing, it's the unit testing, it's the accessibility, it's the security, it's the performance, it's the functional as well, the user experience, and also exploratory. All testing activities needs to be automated as much as possible and executed continuously based on risk impact analysis and other considerations based on the scope of your release. The important additional important words here are also the test that gives value. I will focus on that in just a bit, because that's a very important thing, because you cannot really run 100% of all the tests that you have developed over the past few months or years even upon each code change. It's not realistic, it's not necessary, and it makes no sense. You want to only cover per each software iteration the test cases that gives you value on the right platform. The coverage of the platform is also critical, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Testing across the team. When you are talking about Agile and DevOps, it's no longer QA that is waiting and you throw something over the wall. It's developers, testers, business owners, product owners, everyone chiming in and supporting the testing activities. If it's just on the QA, you're not really doing Agile, you're not doing DevOps, it's just a waterfall, Scrumfall, whatever keyword that you will give this, but it's not really continuous testing. Continuous testing must include everyone in the team that cares about quality, and actually it's the entire feature team. And code coverage is nice, static code analysis, security, vulnerabilities, metrics. It's very nice, it's very important, but it's not the main focus. Like you're covering the test that gives value, you want to cover the features that gives value. This is why I'm focusing on the product, okay? Because you're not releasing a code or software to your end users. You're releasing value, features, functionality that that your end users can benefit, and this is what you need to focus on a coverage perspective. End-to-end scenarios that gives value. Okay, if you get 80% coverage on a method that doesn't really tie itself to any business transactions, it's a waste of time, which you don't have, by the way. So when I spoke with one of our large customers, I asked her, okay, so how you justify the previous slide that quality is done by everyone, shift left should happen, it's quite important. How do you measure, your defect removal efficiency? Okay, you can think about defect removal efficiency of in a different statement as removing escape defects from production, catching the defects as soon as they are being implemented by the developers. Someone will love that I'm saying defects are implemented, but yeah, when the developers write code, they also write bugs. That's a known statement, and you want to catch these bugs as soon as possible. We all know the trend of when you write bugs and you find them a few weeks later, sometimes even a few months later, the cost to the entire organization to debug these failures, to fix them, and to re-release back to production is quite high. Okay, so these are a few of the things that this customer continuously measures to get to this metric of DRE, defect removal efficiency. The amount of defects that are removed during the development phase in conjunction with defects that are detected later in the cycle. You don't need to make it like a mathematical one splitted by the other. You can do it just as a percentage. How many defects are being released to production versus the one that you are able to identify earlier. And when this client of mine did the investigation on the DRE in his case, he found that all of the escape defects were attributed to these kind of root causes. Lack of coverage. I mentioned earlier the coverage. This is why I actually mentioned it. Coverage is quite important, and coverage is related to both platforms, the mobile devices, the web browsers, the desktop configurations, whatever you are supporting, and also the test scenarios. I missed covering a specific end user scenario, which is quite important to the business, and a bug was slipping to production. Lack of and late automation testing. This is the non-shift left reality, where you see developers handing over the build or the binaries for testing too late in the process, leaving too much, leaving actually less time to automate, and this results in a lot of manual testing, which doesn't fit in the cycle. A lot of risks are being taken, resulting in escape defects. In some cases, we also see that the platform itself was not properly designed for testability. There is no proper access to specific functions, APIs. The objects or the elements in the app are constantly changed by the developers without the QA knowing about them. Lack of unit testing. Testing against outdated environments and platforms also results in escape defects. You're simply not testing against the right production environment. You're simply testing against something that was relevant maybe a month or so ago, and this is not reflecting your current end users. In addition to the previous DRE, what Perfecto, which I work for, conducted, we have a cloud which serves millions of test executions. So we try to look at what is the repeated pattern of failures across the different segments. And what we have learned is that, if you look at the script and framework, test automation framework, scripts and frameworks were attributing 40% of the test automation flakiness. Backend services, availability, up to date, and stuff like that were contributing additional 30%. Orchestration issues such as test automation at scale and stuff like that was 50%, 15% of the test cases that failed, and lab availability or lab issues was also 15%. So about 70% of the test automation failures, which are not real bugs, are just noise, okay, were because of scripting, test automation framework, and backend services, okay? And you can double click on a specific category here. For example, when I talk about scripts and framework, I'm talking about working with objects or elements, coding skill set, synchronization between steps, or platform readiness, the prerequisites of your platform before you initiate the test automation activities. This is one set of examples for the 40% of the failures. On the backend issues, simple services availability, data which is not up to date, network configuration which is not properly set. On the orchestration, we do not simply have enough licenses, platforms that allows us to scale as we like. We want to run in parallel, and we are failing because we do not have enough scaling in our lab. Platforms that we are trying to test against are currently in use, which is a very poor coding skill set. You want to always do this kind of checks before you start your test automation. Platforms are disconnected from the network, the basic stuff, right? We see it still happening over and over again. Lab issues, again, if we are talking about mobile devices, some devices are not well configured, some of them are locked, so you cannot really click on the home screen or the application icon because it's still locked. The devices are disconnected from the internet, sometimes they're not stable. So these are also things that we are showing. And why I'm showing you this slide? This slide is quite important because as test owners and you guys online, I trust that you are owning a set of quality responsibilities within your organization. You need at any given time to be able to answer the following 4 questions, which are critical in my mind, because it's enough to have one question unknown or unanswered to have your entire test automation cycle fail or be inefficient. So what's wrong with my scripts and frameworks? What's wrong with my backend activities? What's wrong with my lab? And obviously, what's wrong with my execution? When you have this single pane of glass at any given time that can show you what's going on in your test automation activities, whether you are a developer or test automation engineer or a business tester, this is when you figure out, how to improve and how to move forward and how to be valuable to your organization. When you are able to reduce the noise, this is the common thing of fast feedback, because if you look at some researches that were done by Sogeti Labs, and by the way, by many other research firms, you can look at all the world quality reports over the past few years. They are talking about a lot of noise and flakiness in the test automation. So as you increase the size of your test suite, of your regression suite, you also risk the value that is being sent back to the developers. So let's take as an example a regression suite that can consist of 10,000 test cases. In an average market number, you would see 20% failures. But when you dig deep into these failures, you will see that out of these 2,000 test cases that are failing, maybe 20 test cases, which is about 10%, are actual bugs. Look at the amount of false negatives that we are getting. This is noise. And what does it mean? It means that you are going to lose trust with your developers, you are wasting time and resources, and you are simply not doing your job right. You want to have a clear understanding, clear reporting of what's going on, and you probably need to certify and debug these test cases before making them available in prime time. Okay, if they are not ready for prime time, do not run them. Okay, especially do not include them in your CI/CD, because that's the most riskiest thing that you can do. because everyone will be in panic mode when they will see that you have 2,000 failures. They will say, okay, something is definitely wrong. But at the end of the day, if you only have 20 failures, and maybe if you classify these 20 cases, you will see, you know what, 50%, 10 test cases are not as critical as we thought. The other 10, some of them are known. Maybe we have just 2 bugs and we can release the software as is. But look at how we climbed, or we actually declined from 10,000 to 20 to almost just a few. In theory, this is how things should look like, okay? And you as testers can make it happen by properly certifying, properly paying attention, continuously auditing your regression suite, so it's not becoming outdated, flaky, and risky to the overall pipeline. So if you want to think about certifying your test automation, you want to think about continuous value. If a test case is only running for the sake of running, just to check a mark for you, that's definitely not a good excuse, okay? If the test is running every 3 or 4 software test iterations, it needs to be tagged properly. It needs to be excluded from a nightly run because it doesn't bring any value. Only the test cases that are bringing value continuously needs to be tagged and placed in a special bucket that you maintain. These are your golden test scenarios. These are the test cases that you are going to shine against your management and again against your developers. And at the end of the day, these are the test cases that will most likely identify the bugs for you. All the rest are noise, are candidate for exclusion, are candidate for maybe another cycle of improvement and refactoring, but definitely don't mix between suites that are just for the sake of it and the ones that are providing high value. And you can answer, or filter these test cases by this simple formula. You can create your own. I was just playing here with like a nice if-else algorithm, which is very stupid if you ask me, but it conveyed a message that, if you have a test that you think it's valuable, look at the history of it. Well, was it able to detect defects? If yes, in which areas? Because maybe these areas are lacking additional test cases and you want to focus. Was this test flaky in the previous 3 to 5 software iterations, or was it able to run across multiple platforms, web, mobile, whatever, consistently? Okay. How long this test case specifically runs once the platform is up and running? Okay, if it's less than 5 minutes, it's good. If it's too long, maybe it can be broken into smaller pieces to make it more efficient, more focused on the function that you are trying to cover. If you got at least one no for these check marks, you need to shift delete. Don't get attached to these test cases. Try to delete them. And you want to run this continuously, okay? Every 2-3 software iteration, you want to go back to your golden test suite and ask the same questions. Are they still adding values? Are they still providing, consistent results, finding defects for us? Are they still relevant based on the current application functionality? Or maybe we need to do some refactoring as well, okay? For my previous book, Continuous Testing for DevOps Professional, Marching the Path or Stating the Path Towards Continuous Testing in DevOps, this was the chapter that included some nice metrics that I was able, with my help from a nice colleague in the industry, to define. So these are 27 metrics. Okay, you can say, oh, 27, it's too much. You don't need to take all these 27. Pick 2 or 3 per each vertical: the speed, the quality, and the cost, because at the end of the day, when you're talking to executives, CIOs, IT managers, and you ask them about the cost of testing, this is what they care. Okay, how fast can you deliver feedback? What's the quality that the platform gains when you do this testing, and how much it costs the business? Okay, this is the ROI. And by the way, I will soon remove the ROI from your vocabulary and replace it with a different word. So I will just focus on 1 or 2 per each category, so you get the feeling of why it's important. In addition to the previously displayed slide on the certification of test automation, let's focus on one metric for speed. Okay, and I actually gave it to you. How much time it takes you to run a specific test scenario. This is the third metric, average test execution time. Okay. By the way, it's also, I will also look at the how much time it took me to create it, because if it takes too much to create, to maintain, and to execute, maybe something is wrong in the test design. Okay. These metrics can give you a lot of insights and kind of do some white box analysis to your entire testing strategy, simply improving you. It's not a finger pointing exercise. It's kind of a continuous improvement exercise that you want to do within your developers and testers in the team. On a quality level, yeah, code coverage from a product features perspective, as well as risk coverage, which is the frequency and damage of specific failures from your test execution. Defect leakage to production, the DRE thing, you can think about it here. The cost of hardware, software, and maintenance also can guide you whether you continuously invest in these activities or maybe you do some optimization. Okay, so these are just a set of metrics that you can adopt. Maybe you have your own and you can add, but this is a nice exercise to do in your existing activities. Again, the keyword, you won't forget it after this webinar, is continuously. Doing it once a year makes no sense. Doing it once a quarter makes no sense. You need to do it every few software iterations. As hard as it is for you, it's actually going to pay it back for you. It's going to pay itself, because you will simply see that you are optimizing your productivity and moving forward actually much faster than just dragging a lot of irrelevant resources. So how do you make it happen? So I may mention, in the Agile testing manifesto, the testing needs to happen not just across all testing types, but across the entire team members. And fortunately, the team members in a feature team in a DevOps reality consist of these three different personas. I don't believe I missed anyone, but these are the three personas that are in charge of quality: the developers and the software developer in testing, the business testers. These are the three ones, okay? Developers that are writing the code and maybe will do unit testing for you, the software developer in testing that are in charge of the test automation frameworks, whether they are open source or custom made within the organization, and the manual testers, which are business testers that are doing exploratory testing, and some of them may now jump over to do more codeless, BDD, and stuff like that, to be also part of the CI/CD pipeline. So I don't know if you can see clearly in this slide, and if you're not, if you can't, you can reach out to me. I will be able to share even a higher resolution image. But from one of my clients' dashboard, this is taken from one of my clients' dashboard. Why I decided to show you this slide is not because of this is a client of mine, just because look at the scale. Okay, this client was executing in less than 3 months. You can see it here, June until August. Okay. 1.3 million test cases. Okay, so it was running a lot of test automation scenarios. The beauty of that is that it was running them across so many different frameworks: Espresso for Android, Codeless for Selenium Web. There is XUI test down below for this is here for iOS automation, and Selenium for is responsive website. And oh, by the way, there are also some manual testing, interactive testing that were also reported in this dashboard. Why am I showing it to you? Because as I showed you in the previous slide, when you can collaborate within the team as the Agile Testing Manifesto guides you, you have the business testers that are doing interactive testing and maybe codeless. You have the SDEVs that are doing Espresso and Appium testing, and you have the developers that are doing also Espresso, XUI test, and unit testing, all reporting back to the same dashboard, all of the activities, so the executives, the managers, the decision makers have a data-driven dashboard on which they can base their release go, no go decision, okay? Or at least they can understand where are the painful areas that requires more investments. This is a good practice for you to inherit when you're doing continuous testing. Collaboration, having a one single pane of glass that shows all of the reports from wherever they were originated, whether it's Selenium, Appium, Espresso, XUI test, manual, codeless, whatever. Next, and it's also part of the dependency on your automation stability, is how you select your test automation frameworks, okay, or tools, if you like. They are not just frameworks. Frameworks can be also baked into a larger solution, you know, like a continuous testing portfolio. So you want to look at the following things: the community size, the level of support and documentations, code samples, the SDLC process fitness of the automation framework to what you have right now implemented. If a test automation solution requires you to do some changes to your process, there is a mismatch. I wouldn't go there, okay? If to bring, let's say, a framework such as Cypress, and I love Cypress, by the way, will require the entire team to either learn a new technology or to lose a specific third-party integration that was working with Selenium, maybe this is not the right decision, okay? While we all like the excitement of working with a new framework, maybe it's not the right thing. On the other hand, to be in favor of Cypress, if you are starting a new project and you have good development skills in the organization, maybe starting with a new technology that is getting the buzz out there, has good documentation and support and stuff like that, maybe this will be a nice scenario in opposed to the previous one that I mentioned, to get started with a new framework. So there is no one size fits all here, and you need to be very diligent in your decision criteria process, matching the product, the maturity of the product, the skill set in the organization, the maturity of the framework in the organization to the existing thing that you have in your own project. No one from the framework developers out there, the open source community or other commercial tools, knows better than you what you have in a house, okay? You should be the decision maker. You know what you have. You need to make the right decision. And these are just 6 boxes. If you do not have a nice kind of selection criteria, these are 6 categories or boxes that you can unfold and decide better what should be your next automation framework, or if you want to change something that doesn't work for you today, follow these patterns. And by the way, taking the previous slide for a dry run, if you like, on this slide can show you that whatever you think you know sometimes kind of looks different in the reality. So I recommended you earlier in this webinar to bookmark the OpenSignal website for performance and mobile carrier functionality. I also would recommend for you to bookmark, if you're not bookmarking it yet today, the NPM Trends website. npmtrends.com is another website that can actually show you trends in the open source packages across mobile and web. It can show you how many downloads were for this package. If you drill down per each, it will give you the number of branches, number of contributors, number of support cases, whatever you can think of that can build itself to a nice decision tree if you want to decide between, let's say, WebDriver IO, Concept.js, Selenium, and Cypress. Okay, you can do a nice cut. You don't need, I picked 10 different open source frameworks. You can minimize it to 2 or 3 and get additional insights per each of these open source based on your decide criteria and move forward. Maybe you want to move to a headless browser. So Puppeteer is the newest headless browsers from Google. And it can also, by the way, demonstrate that it's gaining a lot of traction in the industry, a lot of downloads over the past 6 months, which can make it quite popular for you in the overall test automation strategy. In addition to the previous slide, you also want to make sure that you are matching, for your continuous testing, the test that needs to be done based on the functionality and coverage to the frameworks that you are using. So in the previous slide, I was mostly focusing on functional test automation. Here you can look at others like assertion function, code coverage, mocking frameworks, and you name it. So you can look at all of these and kind of custom a nice test automation strategy. Again, going back to the slide on the Agile Testing Manifesto, testing all types of test cases, not just the functional, also code coverage, performance, monitoring, accessibility, and stuff like that. I didn't want to give you advice without really testing it myself. So what I've done in this long, but in my mind, very useful table, I will just focus on the following column, the required skill set, and on the most left column, which is the test framework. And I would like to just show you or prove to you that actually sticking with one software test automation framework is a mistake, especially if you're in DevOps, especially if you have a feature team which consists of multiple practitioners. You want to make sure that you are matching the framework to the skill set. So, and as that will typically focus on Selenium and Appium. Okay, XUI test, Espresso, headless browsers like Puppeteer, Cypress IO, which is also a dev-friendly front-end framework, will be very applicable for developers. Codeless solutions will be applicable for business testers because it does not require coding skill set. And BDD, it's a cross-team thing. So whoever invented TDD and BDD already thought about this cross-team collaboration, but we still see these barriers in between teams. So this slide can show you that you can pick and match different technologies that are very popular today that do not require you to change anything in your existing processes towards making a very solid test automation, high coverage strategy. So how can you measure your test automation value? I gave you a lot of metrics in this webinar and some nice practices, but what we have built also in Perfecto, and you can take other Allure or other open source reporting, C-Lights or whatever framework that is out there, but it's not about the tool, it's about what you want to focus on. So if you want to increase your mobile test automation success rate, and you're failing it to do so today, you want to have the visibility into which platforms, which test cases were causing you the highest headache over the past few iterations. For example, if you can look at the top 5 failing test cases and see them in a nice dashboard, let's say this transfer money scenario was failing 75 times. Okay, find branch was failing 71 times. And this is the age of these test cases. And this test, by the way, the first one never passed. This is a very strong evidence that someone actually messed up here and included a very important, maybe, test case, which wasn't ready for prime time. Okay, this test case was integrated and was executed more than 75 times without even passing once, but it continuously ran. Okay, so you want to have this quality visibility at any given point. So, we are all people, we are making mistakes, it's fine. But if you cannot see these mistakes, if you cannot act upon them, you're simply building more and more noise time after time, release after release. And eventually, you will grow your suite into so many test cases that you're going to lose so much value and result in escape defects. Look at the red flags upon not just, you don't need to wait for, actually, you shouldn't wait for 75 test cases that are failing for you, okay? You want to look at the red signs upon the first execution or upon the 2 or 3 executions. If a test case fails and you see that it failed because there were pop-up handling issues, okay, that you didn't take care of, you weren't using the right element locator, okay, you were using a platform that was constantly being used by someone else at the same schedule, at the same time that you are running it through CI. These are all red flags that may indicate that you have a platform health, you have a scheduling issue, you have a lab issue, or you have a coding skill set issue with a pop-up, for example, or the elements. Look out for the red flags. Exclude the test cases immediately. Don't wait 75 failures per test case to just get this red flag. 2 times, 3 times, that's like in baseball, 3 strikes out. A test case that fails 3 times in a row shouldn't be part of any cycle. It needs to be excluded, needs to be reevaluated, refactored, that only then be brought back into your pipeline. Create your own root cause analysis. To be in the know-how, you can create your own root causes through test unit, JUnit frameworks, and others, but focus on the valuable root causes that give you the fast feedback and can allow you to fix the issues very fast rather than just waiting, as mentioned earlier, X amount of times for a test to fail. In addition, you want to gain visibility into CI. Jenkins is good, is great. There are Bitrise, Azure DevOps. There are many tools out there that are driving through CI your test automation. But if you cannot see the health over time, you are actually not getting the full value from your CI. So you want to see if the CI jobs are becoming more lengthy over time, or they are becoming flaky, unstable, and take action upon them. If you can do it through Jenkins, it's fine, but the default Jenkins wouldn't give you the right visibility. Be creative, see how you can build more value on top of your builds. Since I'm representing Perfecto, but in today's webinar and in today's reality with the COVID-19 and stuff, I want to recommend all of you. Again, I'm talking to you as an agnostic presenter here. Look at cloud testing as an enabler for continuous testing stability. Look at what's causing you today. If you're not leveraging the cloud today and you're doing a lot of your testing in-house, see where are your inefficiency, see if the cloud can suit you better and allow you to uncover a lot of bottlenecks and delays in your schedule. These are just a few benefits that I collected from all over the place, and it can be cloud that allow you to do testing. But by the way, you can think about cloud that only serves the enterprises from a storage perspective. Think about Google Cloud and Amazon and others. You have a lot of services that are being delivered to you through the cloud that simply allows you to do things much more reliable. We have seen in the previous research that lab availability, orchestration, and backend services are some of the root causes for test automation flakiness. Cloud is exactly the solution to remove all of these bottlenecks, because when you have a cloud that serves you all the platforms, the browsers, the mobile devices, and stuff like that, you are no longer relying on the QA guys that will connect via USB and make sure that the devices are always charged. You're getting it as a service. And finally, these are, and I also mentioned these in my previously authored books. These are the 4 things that you want to look at if you do not have them in-house today. You want to make sure that you have the proper creation. I've shown you how you can collaborate within the different practitioners. You want to have a test creation environment that serves all different skill sets. Business testers, developers, SDETs. You want to have the execution layer that supports the unlimited scalability to shrink down the overall execution time and can work with any framework that you have selected, whether it's open source, commercial, or both. And you want to have a reliable lab. Okay, you can build it in-house as long as it's reliable. If you do it in the cloud, you'll probably get higher benefits. And at the end of the day, none of these 3 pillars matter if you cannot analyze the results at the end, because once you click launch on your TestMG or on your Jenkins, then you are blind. The only value that you are going to see back from the execution is in the test report. And if the test report is not good enough, it's not detailed enough, it does not give you the root cause in a very easy and good serviced way, you won't be able to deliver fast feedback continuously, and that's what DevOps is all about. With that, Magdi, I would like to conclude and leave some time for questions, if there are any.
Well, I'm looking here. I don't have any questions from the audience. Anyone, if you're having a question at this point, go ahead, please, and tab the questions tab, unless anyone provided questions through the chat. Let me see if there's anything on the chat. Actually, no. So if you have a question at this point, you could click on the questions tab and go ahead and provide the questions.
And if not, feel free to do an offline chat with me either through Twitter. I actually created recently a Test Automation Expert Slack channel, which is open for everyone. Feel free to continue the discussion over there. If not, I hope that everything was so clear that
I have a couple of questions here.
Oh,
One question from Gerald. He says, for someone who has done manual testing in his or her entire career, what do you recommend for him or her to do first to speed up the test
okay.
automation?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that especially these days, and it's not related just to specific platform, mobile or web, because we see today both mobile and web frameworks that are becoming more easy to use even for non-developers. So think about the new Selenium IDE. It's a free tool, allows you to record and playback with kind of a self-healing mechanism. So I would start with the basic automation concept. So think about your high value exploratory testing that you are doing over the past few years. Try to see if you can automate them through record and playback or through BDD. Learning BDD with a Gherkin syntax is one of the easiest way that I can think of to ramp up test automation skills. You will probably need some basic Java knowledge, but you can rely on some of your developers or the SDETs in the organization to support you. But you can easily merge exploratory testing in Gherkin with BDD and run them through automation in any IDE today, like IntelliJ, Eclipse, and so forth. So codeless or BDD would be my recommendation.
All right. Another question from Charles says, in that if then else pseudocode you showed us regarding test scenarios, adding a value, there was a condition passes across all platforms. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So especially in the digital front, when you are running a test, whether you are testing for your website, which by the way, website runs on both mobile and web, or if it's mobile hybrid application, it also has a web element. You want to certify the test upon during the debugging and development phase, and to make sure that it runs consistently on two Androids, two iPhones, a tablet, a desktop browser, a Mac OS, before merging it into your CI/CD or the regression suite. If it only runs on your machine, this is the bad practice, okay? You want to make sure that it either passes or fails. By the way, it can fail if there is a bug, but you want to have high trust test scenario, and you can only have a high trust test scenario when you certified it across multiple platforms, not just your own, okay? So few Android versions, few tablets, a desktop browser, again, depending on the application, but you want to test it across few platforms before you give it a go.
All right. I don't see any more questions. As I said earlier, this webinar is being recorded and will be available at the International Institute for Software Testing website and sometime next week. With that, with no more questions, I'd like to thank Eran very much for his time. Certainly, it's a lot of details, a lot of information to digest. Thank you for your time, Eran. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing this experience with us. Obviously, it shows that you have a lot of experience there. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for being in this webinar, and hopefully we'll meet you in another webinar. Stay safe, stay home, enjoy your time.
Thank you so much, Magdi, and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.